As humanity traverses the collective dark night of the soul, we came together and decided to step up amongst so much insanity, to be an authentic, heart-centered and unified voice in sharing our personal stories and experiences, with the hope of inspiring and awakening others into their true nature as the eternal God, light and love that we are. In this critical time of evolution, the time is now to choose peace and harmlessness, to seek alignment with truth and courage. The time is now to cultivate our soul, to understand our multi-dimensional selves, whilst guarding and protecting our minds. Let us break down the walls of separation and classification. Let's reconnect our hearts to the oneness. Will you take steps to heal yourself, to choose pro-human values? Our inner work is to free ourselves from pain and delusion, so we can live with clarity and coherence in service to others and our communities. What is the agenda of the anti-human controllers? What is the agenda of divide and conquer? Imagine what life could be like right now if you lived on this planet in harmless actions. How can we stand up for our inherent human rights? Can we do the right thing in the face of tyranny, in reclaiming our sovereign freedom, demanding truthful information and full disclosure? For one and for all, we are the Truth Pulse. Hi, welcome to the Truth Pulse.
Hello.
Today is 11/11. I just thought I'd mention that. It's a bit of a sacred day, 11/11. So our intention today is journey to the core self. We're going to be talking about this, and Trinity is going to be hosting, and she's going to be sharing her story. So a little bit about the journey to the core self. Well, it's really about the liberation from the perpetual state of suffering that we have with our self-defeating ego behaviors. And we are also going to discuss, false identity, and what that means. And we're also going to be discussing our shadow self, which also relates to, the micro to macro, macro to micro levels. So over to Trinity.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Sonia, for being here and sharing and participating in this Truth Pulse container that we've created, which enables us to express and have a voice and share our journeys and what we're learning on the way. So as Linda mentioned, today we will be discussing and sharing about the individual and universal shadow body and how humanity's original trauma and wounding of disconnection from the unity field, and we discussed this in our previous podcast when we touched upon the galactic history of humanity. So how this original trauma of disconnection from unity were systematically and aggressively abused and exploited by the negative aliens. This is where and when the installation of the negative ego constructs into the planetary body, the planetary brain, and also into every human that was born on this planet have begun. So it's a long story and a long history to this construct, which we term as the ego, negative ego construct. So the negative ego is an artificial construct, and along with accumulated trauma, memories, and karmic superimposition forms the individual and universal shadow body. So the negative ego is part of the shadow body. And unfortunately, the shadow body has become a part of human light body. I just would like to give a very brief description of the universal shadow body. I took it from Ascension Glossary, and it's very concise, but it speaks directly and calls a spade a spade. So the universal shadow body emerged from out the reversal current of the 11th dimension, in which the fallen black hole entities were reconfigured into black dragon avatar collectives with AI brains. These shadow creatures became the entity attachments to all living beings at individual, collective, and other levels. So this is a very interesting definition and very interesting summary, highlighting the fact that the shadow body was actually formed at 11 dimension. And that was during this explosion of the cradle of lava, when our planet and all its inhabitants passed through the ring of fire, which created a rip in the fabric of time and space of our universal matrix and beyond. And the universal shadow body, that this is how it all began. Currently, we are obviously in ascension cycle. And during the ascension cycles, this is when the universal shadow body starts being purged. And this is what's happening now. Our collective, individual, universal shadow body is being purged. And inevitably, it's affecting each one of us on an individual level. So when the shadow body is activated and purged, it causes all buried and unhealed traumas and memories to come onto surface and be played out in outerscape and in our lives. So, and we can see it, what's happening currently on a political arena, on the economical arena, and every sphere of society. We are now sort of adjusting to a new normal, and what is being pushed by the government establishment. And this is all part of this shadow purging. So it's good to know that this is what's happening. And of course, the negative alien agenda and their selective cabal groups are trying very hard to re-traumatize humanity, to push humanity into their original trauma, into those original traumatic, devastating timelines, via the fear that is being propagated now under the pretext of lab-created and patented virus, in order to instigate more chaos, confusion, worrying, everything, is being thrown into the mix. These same tactics were used before, they're used now, the tactics of creating a problem and then coming up with a solution. And of course, the solution is to, the problem is destroying the economy, destroying, putting a lot of fear around, impoverishing people, making them more dependent on the system, on the handouts from the system, on the benefits, and of course, implementing totalitarian technocracy, totalitarian control, and to further subjugate humanity. So this is what's happening at the moment in the outerscape, and each one of us are feeling this in our sort of micro macro effects. So we are all being purged, and the fears are all coming on the surface. So just to summarize that this event is triggering obviously unconscious memories of trauma and fear in each one of us. And in some ways, it's our duty, those of us who are waking up, to see what it is, to clear it, to heal it, and to make a firm stand against this tyranny that is trying to implement itself through all these various means. So this is a brief introduction, just to remind that the information we present here have been sourced from the Energetic Synthesis website and Ascension Glossary. We also used other resources as we were guided. We would like to send our gratitude to the ES Container, to the Courageous Warriors of Light, Lisa and Thomas, and the whole ES community, and of course to our beloved Crystal Star Guardians who are here with us now at this point. Thank you. Appreciate your assistance. And thank you for your guidance and for the information that you were pointing us to when we were preparing for this podcast. So, ladies, anything you want to chime before I move on?
No, that was beautifully recapped. That was good. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks to the Guardian
Yes.
teams. Thanks to
Yeah.
ES.
Yeah.
Yeah, much appreciation.
Yeah. We are all kind of supporting each other in this.
Yeah.
And also just to remind our listeners that you know, we prepare for this podcast, and when we prepare, we always remind ourselves that to come from a place of intuitive kind of feeling and intuitive guidance, rather than sort of become too overly mentalized. So again, we just recapping that and reminding that this information is not meant to feed the mental body, although we try to give some kind of structure and flow to this. But ultimately, it's more aimed at assisting in developing sensory perceptions, in developing discernment, in developing yes or no radar, and almost like a visceral body kind of feeling. So, you know, if you're listening to this information and you have a resonance or you have a feeling and it's a body sensation, it's something that kind of you observe, this is all very good, because this is something that we are aiming to sort of model as well and integrate into the preparation. And this is the aim. The aim is to assist in development of higher sensory perceptions, and move away from the mental body a little bit. So again, if you feel that you don't understand something, or something just doesn't sit, maybe just leave it for a while, and maybe it's not for now, maybe it's for later. These types of podcasts is also helpful maybe to listen and come back to them again, because, you know, the healing process isn't linear. So it's kind of like cycling all the time. So just a little reminder to us. Okay, so I will sort of do a little small intro and then pass on to Sonia. So in our earlier podcast, we discussed humanity's hidden galactic history, and we feel that this is important to sort of recap a little bit, because it's very linked to our shadow body and the creation of it. So we decided we were going to just do a little recap on the origins and the players of our galactic history, which were involved in pulling the Earth into the fallen system. So the Earth had a status of a fallen system for quite a while. And we discussed that before, the wall in time and humanity's origin. So let's just recap it in a bit more detail. So I'm passing on to Sonia.
Okay, well, thank you, Trinity, for all of that information. Much appreciation. And, you know, it should be said that, you know, in the beginning, we were all connected in with the heart of God, that which we are. Okay, there was a direct connection. And part of the ascension process is for us to reclaim that connection. Okay, we're all working on this piece because it's been shut down from us. But as part of the recap of our origins, you know, it was helpful for me to understand, and it eased the pain in my heart to understand this information. And that is that all biological forms within the creational realm of our time matrix are stemming from the God source field and are comprised of 3 primal light and sound emanations. This is the mother ray, the blue mother ray, which is the 13th ray, the 14th ray, gold ray, and the magenta ray, which is the 15th ray. So let me say that again. We've got the Holy Mother 13th ray, which is blue colored, and we've got the golden ray of Christos, which is at the 14th dimension, and we've got the Holy Father ray, which is the magenta ray, and that's at the 15th dimension. Okay, so those are all of the 3 primal light and sound emanations, again, that all of us are stemming from. And wanted to remind people that when we say the word Christ, we are actually referring to eternal love and wisdom. Okay, we're not necessarily meaning it as the person, although that can mean that has its own place as well. But the diamond sun blueprint of the human is the Christ. It's the Christ consciousness. That's what we're trying to say when we say the word Christ, when referencing it in this way. Okay, so again, eternal love, wisdom, power as a source, field, and intelligence gestalt based upon the law of one principles. So I hope that made sense. I was a little tongue-tied when I was saying that, but I hope that came out clearly. Can I clarify anything on that? That's okay?
Came out clearly.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, so within the universal Trinity that I just explained, these three primal light and sound fields individuated themselves into emanations known as the Emerald Order, the Gold Order, and the Amethyst Order. And these orders are synonymous with the Crystal Star Guardian teams that we mentioned, that we thanked in the beginning. Okay, our founder race beings, our progenitors of the human race, tying in also with the ancient ancestors, just in general. Okay, all those who are hosting this ascension, and they are protecting the rights of spiritual liberation for all living beings, all living things, to evolve as God's sovereign free. Did either of you have anything that you wanted to say or add to that?
Yeah, I just want to say that this was the a piece on our origin, just to remind the audience that we are recapping. So this was on our origins, and then you're going to move on now to recapping a little bit on galactic wars. So just sort of keeping the thread going.
Mm-hmm. So if we feel like we're complete in that little area, we didn't go into great deep detail, but we wanted to recap on that. So we also wanted to recap on, we have discussed this before, but we're going to recap on the Galactic Wars. Okay, and if we remember from previous podcasts, we talked about the Lyran Wars, which is about 20 million years ago, long time ago. This information has been erased from our memories for the most part. Okay, this is the amnesiac barriers, this is the consciousness wiping, but this is a piece of information, a very important piece of our galactic history to bring forward so that we can start healing, connecting the dots and healing. Okay. So the Lyran War 20 million years ago is part of the very first seed of the Antichrist conflict that Trinity was mentioning earlier, and we're going to be breaking this down. But and as mentioned, again, the black hole entities from WISA conquered the entire Milky Way system. The cradle of Lyra was destroyed, which caused the destruction of the solar logos, or the brain. Okay, and destroyed the cosmic Christos, the avatar matrix level of consciousness in our universal time matrix. And it began the separation from our 12-strand DNA. Okay, and this trigger event was the beginning of the damage of the universal portals exiting out of this time matrix. Okay, and the extraction or removal of the Lyran DNA, the silicate matrix, the diamond sun DNA, okay, and that which was supposed to enable the capacity for us to live as eternal crystal avatar human beings. So that, in a nutshell, all of that destruction has inhibited that from happening for us. This is what we're reclaiming and bringing back. I'll pause there just for a minute. Did I recap that well enough? Anything to add before I move on? Okay, so then when the explosion of Lyra happened, okay, what this did is, I wanted to explain a little bit, another little piece that I brought into this, and that is that there were two suns in the same orbit, okay, two orbiting suns at that time, okay, in the universe. And when the explosion happened, the two suns were separated, and one of the suns exploded, okay, as part of the explosion. When it exploded, the way I understand it is it imploded as well. It did like a reverse of itself. And when the reverse happened, it creates a propulsion force, like a vacuum, like a suction. And it's taking with it that in its vicinity. And it sucked Lyra in through this black hole that was created from the explosion. And the sun, my understanding, is this massive, vast consciousness, raw consciousness, RA consciousness. Okay, a sun consciousness, a God consciousness. So this beautiful, amazing consciousness, the raw consciousness, and all of the components of Lyra, okay, all of the bodies, consciousness units, everything got sucked in through this black hole that was created from the explosion. And it went out the other side, okay? And that formed our polarity universe. And as well, when this explosion happened with the sun, an anomaly was created. There was a rip in the time-space fabric. And it has been labeled by the progenitors, the guardian teams, as the ring of fire. Okay, so we have a rip in the time-space fabric because of this explosion. And that is something that we've been here as human beings to heal. We as human beings have a synthesizing principle within ourselves. And what this means is we are the micro to the macro. I would say, the light body construction of who we are as a human being, the prototype, was designed to heal the rip in the ring of fire that happened from the explosion. And the way that is done is that we are comprised of both feminine and masculine principles. We are solar consciousness. So in a sense, the way it was explained to me is that we have two suns within our light body construct, the human prototype, the two suns representing the feminine, the masculine aspects. Okay, and so our job is, as an individual, as each individual, whether you are a female or a male, okay, you have both feminine and masculine aspects within yourself, two suns, okay, and we are supposed to bring those into union within ourselves. This is hierogamic union within. When that happens, that healing, that coming into wholeness, it gives me chills to say this. I just got chills down my legs. When that happens, this impacts on a universal level. And this heals the separation of the two suns and this beautiful raw consciousness that was exploded into bits. Okay, this helps to reconnect and reform the separation and to pull back the fragments. Okay, so that there can be wholeness and integration that happened with that. So that's pretty amazing. That's the architecture of the human body. It's quite something. And again, the human body, the prototype, is also here, as I mentioned, to collect the fragments of the raw consciousness, but also everybody else that fragmented from the Lyran explosion and everything else that got sucked through that wall of time. Linda's going to be explaining about this a little bit further, but that got sucked through that ring of fire. Okay, so we're here in this polarity version of the universe to recollect and to heal ourselves, but then also on the planetary, galactic, universal levels in that way. The consciousness damage that happened, okay, it happened through all of the dimensions that we live within our universal time matrix now. This polarity universe happened through all of the dimensions, happened all the way down. And the Wiesa entities utilized these original Lyran coded fragments that were exploded into bits, okay, to form the phantom matrix. And this is the base 10 artificial tree of life. We talked about that last time. I know that Linda, you were taking us through that in our last podcast, and we had shown the artificial tree of life. Okay, and this is the anti-life, Metatronic anti-life reversals, and that which has been directly enslaving us and other living species to consume their light and resources. Okay, and this is the timeline of their artificial intelligence mind control weapon, the victim victimizer software, which is very effectively generating polarity reversal currents and creating consciousness slaves that could provide a source of energy harvesting for these negative alien agenda beings. So I jumped around a little bit. I'm adding that in, and I had mentioned the prototyping of the human being. But I wanted to mention one other thing before I pass it on to Linda, because she's going to explain to us about the electric wars. But so imagine putting all these pieces together and you have this explosion that happened, right? And what often happens, my understanding from my research, is that universes can just be shut down, okay? And as space dust units, right? Can you imagine what happened from the explosion? However, this is where a decision was made by the Guardian forces and Guardian teams. And they said, no, wait a minute now. We have this amazing consciousness that, you know, is destroyed. We don't want this to happen. We want to try to make this work. What can we do about this? That's when the human prototype was created. Okay, to heal the rift. Instead of returning everything to space dust, we get to help heal the rift. We get to help heal the raw consciousness, the Lyran consciousness, all the bits and pieces. We get to reclaim that here in this polarity universe. And that allows for a reclamation. It allows for, it's like you get to pull back in your parts instead of them just floating around as space dust out there and their universe being shut down. So I hope that that helps to explain things. Was there anything that either of you wanted to add on that?
Before Linda talks about electric wars, I just again would like to highlight, because I feel this is very important to get this really, like, to get that, is that the timeline of AI, artificial intelligence, mind control weapon, and victimizer software, which is a polarity software, extreme polarity software, master sleep, good, bad, you know, it's polarized to the extremes, to the point where extremes forgot that they have a middle or the center point of union. This type of timeline is aggressively being repeated or replicated and pushed now with this pushing of 5G, with the pushing of 6G, with the pushing of this 25,000 satellites nets, satellite kind of, yes, electromagnetic net, microwave net around the Earth. And they're trying to recreate that original timeline that happened 20 million years ago, whereabouts, to push that and to suck humanity again into this perpetual kind of like sucking and siphoning and creating this, you know, bringing this software, playing this polarity games, and disabling the humanity's ability to evolve and leave this matrix if they so choose. So I just wanted to really highlight this, that we are seeing the repetition of history, almost like a recycling that has been aggressively pushed and implemented on humans. And so we need to wake up to this, and we need to see that in order to, what Sonia said, we have this capacity to heal that and move on from it. And this is up to each one of us to take this call and utilize our inherent abilities to synthesize the polarities once and for all, close this timeline, move on to the next higher frequency. That's all I wanted to add on this.
That's important, and I wanted to ask you something, both of you, whoever wants to chime in, and this is really to integrate into my own consciousness too, because as we mentioned before, we're healing right along with everybody else, and we're trying to integrate this information and learn from it. And something popped up when you were saying that, and I just want to make sure that these dots are connecting within my consciousness. Should we recap quickly why the entities are trying to I would say, you said put into motion again, over and over again, these repeating timelines. Yes. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing this?
Well, to keep enslaving us, to keep you know, recycling us, because we are lush. We are, you know, we provide a source of energy for them. We, you know, like you said, we have divine spark in us. These entities lost their divine spark. Some of them never had the emotional body, never had that kind of source connection. Some of them are artificial from the very start. So they need us. So they're pushing. I mean, who willingly is going to give up the source of their food? I mean, we are food for them, energetic food, and have been in the last like thousands, millions of years. So why would they gonna give this up? They want to push. They want to continue. They want to have this looping, you know, immortality. You know, this kind of like immortal looping, AI looping, where they will be constantly parasiting and feeding. And this is where the eugenics, and this is where the, you know, these human machines are coming. You know, let's merge with the machine, let's merge with the AI. Yeah, they would love that, because, you know, they will directly could plug in and suck us dry. This is why. This is my take. I don't know if Linda wants to chime in.
Yes, thank you for that. That's what's coming to mind is, you know, these different races. It is the ultimate power trip and the ultimate power game. You know, they have set themselves up for, you know, being false gods. You know, this is what they've done. You know, it's very much the you know, when you think about the predator, this is what they are. You know, these predators. It's they've just been prolific, really, at doing everything they can. You know, we are, you know, just slaves, basically. So, you know, any way that they can do what they can to further their own programs, you know, their own, whatever they want, whatever they need, you know, it's just everything is, you know, in service to them, basically. And, you know, so if they're setting themselves up as false gods, then, you know, that's why they've reversed everything. This is why, you know, it's just a complete parasitic system that they've set up. That's their only way to exist. And this is why they keep over and over. We've had genocide after genocide. We've had these wars. There's so many. When you look at the timeline trigger events, there is so many of them. And so, just to have this awareness and just to be able to clear, what we can. For me, that was just, it was like a missing piece. It just, nothing made sense. I could, just think about shadow clearing, thinking about the ego, but it just really makes sense when I look at this antichrist. I could not ever, I felt it from such a young age. How can people be so cruel? How can people be like this? And when you understand this predator mind construct that is completely alien to our divine DNA, to our who we truly are, they've set up the false gods, false parents, this false Christ, false everything that you can think of. It's like, wow. But it makes sense to me, it just really, yeah. Anyway, before I go off on a tangent.
That's really well said. Were you pausing? Because I was gonna just add one little piece. Thank you for that. It was really well said, Linda. I really like that. It's like, this is it's the game that they're playing. It's what they've set up. And doesn't it tie beautifully in with the topic today of, excuse me, of the false identity? Doesn't it tie beautifully in with what you both just said, with the false identity and with the consciousness traps? Because I was asking the question, well, why are they doing this? Why would you do such a thing? But isn't this tying in again with the false identity, the consciousness traps, right? They're the false god, or, pinning themselves as the false gods. So I just wanted to mention that for my own consciousness integration and for our listeners.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm done with that little piece. I don't know, Linda, if you wanted to maybe expand upon the electric wars a bit. Another little recap and a war in time or wall in time.
Yes. So with electric wars, we have roughly 5 million years ago, which was a race war over the first root race, which gave us the wall in time. It's also separated us further from our 12-strand DNA, which created fragments in the timelines. And I think we've mentioned this before about the 2D, 4D soul split. So that's a brief summary of electric wars. And, which also gave them further leverage to then, keep constructing their AI technology, which has always been used as a, the warfare against humanity, against the Earth population. And, they'll find any which way to progress their AI. When you look back at our history, they make out that it was very primitive, maybe even 1,000 years ago. Our whole history, when you look back, it's just like, no, hang on a minute, it just does not ring true whatsoever. When you do start doing the research and you look at the truth and what resonates within your heart, I always felt that there was something seriously wrong. What we're being fed. And so when I found out about this AI, it totally made sense. Of how they can manipulate and control, our multidimensionality and control this earth plane that we're on. So yeah, I mean, this AI tech really, it's set in motion from the higher dimensions that we were in that time. It gradually pulled us down. They were more able to control them from these inorganic black holes or the black sun. which is, I think you referred to that, Sonia, about the Wezadrak system or the Weezer system. So with this, all this damage that was happening in our time matrix as a result of all these wars and the explosions, you know, it creates further vulnerability. So, you know, with these, when you think about the different races that existed in this time matrix, and then, you know, you have us here within this solar system, you know, we're being pulled down into these, you know, what we call phantom fields. You know, the phantom is like the lower phantom fields are, you know, they're sort of dark AI constructs. And the wall in time, we call it the wall in time as it quarantines this part of the solar system. It sort of quarantines this Earth from then accessing the higher dimensions. It you know, stopped us from accessing you know, more of our sisters and brothers, basically, in the star system around us.
Because they were all being impacted by the poisons, and right, so that's quarantine.
Yes,
We've been quarantined.
So there was a choice by the, you know, the founder guardians to then, okay, well, you know, we've just got to just close this off for now, you know, and then eventually, you know, we can get back in there. But at that time, you know, just to save the rest of all the other star races, it was like, okay, that just had to be done. And yeah, so that was when we passed through the ring of fire, as Sonia mentioned. You know, so then we became, you know, this density just became, you know, thicker and thicker, really, which became, you know, devastating to us. So if you can imagine, you know, we're connected to God's source. You know, we're connecting to our higher dimensions and who we really are. And this created, you know, an extremely devastating, you know, rip within us. You know, what we call a seed fear. So, you know, this seed fear then created, you know, it was very painful, you know, being ripped off from your true parent, you know, it was devastating for us. So, you know, we call this our core trauma. You know, it's like an imprint of separation, or the walls of separation. And this was, you know, further manipulated by the AI and by the controllers. So this is when they started to bring in and to install the predator construct, the predator mind of the ego. So this imprint recorded itself in the 3 layers of ego, you know, which then creates more fears stemming from this original core wound that we have. And so this really imprinted us, you know, with individually and collectively, with this seed fear and with these 3 layers of ego. So with the, you know, the first layer is basically, you know, our shock, our trauma, the devastation. And that's buried in the unconscious mind. Then we have the second layer. And from that, it became, you know, the lack of trust. It became betrayal, abandonment. And the fear was recorded also in the instinctual layers of our minds within the ego. We also have a third layer, which, you know, ties in with our cosmic rage. You know, there are spirits of shame, of guilt, of an entrapment. So when you think of, like, you know, the God beings that we were, and, you know, the programs, the fear that then comes in of shame, you know, maybe we could have done something more, you know, to help save us, or we could have, you know, this, that, or the other. You know, this is what the ego likes to start playing. And the entrapment. So all of this was recorded, that we have carried around with us for this, you know, a long length of time now. So yeah, I think I touched upon the walls of separation that these created. And then it also ties in with archetypes. that we're going to be discussing. I think Trinity is going to bring that up later on. And so this, these walls of separation, that we then do not have the knowledge or the awareness or the feeling of our inner core spirit. This gradually, we descended more and more, and it became degraded, basically, which created the houses of ego. So briefly, the houses of ego are addiction or lust, wrath and rage, greed and avarice. We also had the fourth one, which is envy and jealousy, gluttony and waste. The sixth one, we have laziness, discouragement, and pride, self-importance. So these houses of ego, it's like a cycle, a perpetual state of suffering, really, at the end of the day. And then the antidotes for this now that we have become aware of is our spirits of Christ, the 7 spirits of Christ. And I think I'll be sharing that later, when we discuss the tools to help, clear out our shadow self and to help clear the ego. And so now, we're at this point now. So, we have this knowledge, we have this truth and awareness that's surfacing, that has been surfacing for quite a while. And so, we have this ascension that we are going through right now. And, I'd just like to mention that this wall in time, this quarantine that we were under, has been lifted.
Yay.
So now it's really enabling humanity to actually consciously participate with our liberation. So, it's good news.
Yeah.
Now we're able to, have our healing process, is the truth that, that is front and center now. Whatever is being revealed, it's coming out. Everything's coming out into the darkness for us to clear, for us to look at in our, the truth of who we are in the light of the Christ. So yeah, that's me.
I had a comment.
Yeah.
And that is that the more I research this, and this might be helpful for the listeners, the more I research all of this galactic history, I tell you, I'm starting to be like, you've got to be kidding me. It's really like, ouch in my heart. Just wanted to say that because the reality is when the truth of things have been shut down, and then we start to, as you mentioned, Linda, the quarantine's been lifted. So what that means is the cosmic plasma light's coming down and it's helping to clear out the dross, the miasma. It's helping to awaken us in various ways, right? And so other people are going to start awakening as well, and everybody's at different levels. But when you do start to really look at this information and say, well, gosh, maybe that's where the Star Wars movies originated from, like the ideas. Maybe that's where, all of these different sci-fi movies originated from. Oh my gosh, these things actually happened? Holy moly. Ouch, is what I'm feeling. Yeah. And I'm a part of that pain. Ouch. It's really eye-opening. Just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that's interesting because I wanted to also mention this because I think since about 2013, maybe 2014, when I had a little bit more time, my daughter grew up, I had a little bit more time to dedicate to my personal growth. I started feeling this heavy ache each time I go to nature and I look at this beauty around me. I have tears pouring, and I'm like, why am I crying? I should be rejoicing. This is such beauty. Why am I crying? And when I went back to the source of that, it was some very old pain that something very beautiful has been desecrated, distracted, used, humiliated, subjugated, destroyed. These are all the words that are coming. I mean, I have goosebumps now when I speak, so I haven't done with it yet. I haven't cleared that yet fully because I still feel I go and I look at the eyes of the wild animals when I encounter them. I sense the same. On one hand, I sense this beauty, and on another hand, I said, why did we have to go through all this? How come this such beauty was destroyed? You know, this. So I am sort of sharing. This is the memory that I am possibly clearing and healing that is coming from those original timelines. What Sonia said, that yeah, it's when you start going deep into it. And I just want to say to the listeners that they might relate to that, and they might not know why these tears are coming to them. There could be lots of reasons, you know, micro, macro, it's you know, we are multidimensional. So if I cry on a psychological level, it could be also, it'll reverberate to all the levels. So if we were to go to the core trauma, it probably will be sourced to the fall and destruction of Tara, to the fall of our time matrix, RIP, you know, that ring of fire, you know, it'll be sourced to those wars and holocausts. So that's what I wanted to also add a little bit. Okay, so anyone else wants to add anything before we move on? No? Okay, so thank you, Linda. Thank you, Sonia, for sharing and giving us a very good recap. And I hope that listeners understood and it was clear. And we talked about the historical events and our origins. And now we're going to step into the now. We're going to step into the here and now, and to see how these traumas and how these houses of ego, how these predatory mindsets are being played for us individually. So I will start from my story, and we will share the stories, but I'll start from my own personal experience of conscious participating in ego dismantling and shadow clearing. It's interesting. I noticed when I was preparing for this podcast, one of my traumas probably is to do with separating myself from the feeling. Yes, this is the 2-4D split. Okay, the trauma of splitting my heart as a result of pain, because I noticed that whenever I write something, I always avoid talking from the first person, from myself. I always try to put a little distance and be very general. This is interesting observation. I picked that up. And this is one of those eureka moments that came to me when I was writing this piece here, because I was very kind of distant, detached, almost dissociated. It helped me to take care of the pain and trauma and the feeling. So I just want to say that it is important for us to sort of understand maybe that ego personality, what we know as ego, and a lot of psychology insists that ego is a very important construct and it needs to develop. But the way how we understand it in this system we're in the 3D, it's a false construct, really. It's a dead energy structure. In its pure form, the ego, maybe the Sanskrit word for the ego is ahamkara. Those who done a little bit of Eastern philosophy, they will know. Or it's like I am that, or I am this, I am the awareness. It's the first point of differentiation from the source. This is the kind of like ego in its pure sense. It's not the same as the ego personality. That's it. It's not the same. So we have this distinction. So the I am that awareness comes from the point of union, from the heart. It's a state of being. It's individual, but it's connected to the source. It doesn't have these constructs, this artificial type of belief systems that are very rigid. It's very intuitive, creative, and spontaneous, and it's in the now. So this is the type of kind of pure ego, or the type of awareness that is close to the source. But the ego identity that we call the ego or the negative ego comes from the point of separateness, separation. Yeah. And I personally experience the two. Okay. So the one which is coming from the separateness, usually I experience it in my solar plexus. When I am connected to that pure state, to that sort of pure ego where I experience myself as an individuality, but I am somehow connected. I don't have this sense of separation. I don't need to, it's like almost, I don't have anything to defend. I don't have anything to prove. I don't have anything to I just am. And I am unfolding and I'm existing and I'm spontaneously, it's just beautiful how it flows. And this is that type of individuality, that kind of like pure ego that is unfolding, pure individuality that is unfolding from the heart. Yes. So this is what I would sort of, today we are talking about this sort of solar plexus construct, which is, you know, dead construct, artificial, not natural to us. And this dead structure houses the false identities. Yeah. And these false identities are the archetypes, you know, the false, the kind of extreme archetypes, the archetypes that are being taken to the extreme and separated from the source field. Because it's nothing wrong with the archetypes, but when they are taken to the extreme and separated from the source field, source like the 0 point union, then they become destructive. It becomes a death culture because these opposites could never unite. So this dead structures, they are driven by various self-defeating behaviors, addictive behaviors, negative behaviors, also known as survival mechanism. And this is all formed in childhood in response to some sort of trauma, in response to sort of also sort of these judgments that are imposed upon us, that we learn as a conditioning through the events we experience. And also simply just to basically survive in the harsh reality, the child feeling, you know, threatened. So the child's going to employ some kind of defense mechanism that are going to be quite rigid at some point, but the child needs to survive. So we're all kind of going through this grooming system from birth, yes, and through the childhood. Yeah. So this is just a little kind of intro, and now I'll sort of go a little bit personal. So from my personal journey, I came to see that this ego identity that I considered as myself, you know, and it took me like 40 plus years of my life to kind of finally get to that point where I realized that actually this identity that I considered myself is actually false. All of it is false. There is a core somewhere, but I can't even get to it. And I spent most of my life, you know, being quite rigid, being quite fearful, being sort of a lot of pain, a lot of kind of defensive behaviors, a lot of solar plexus stuff. You know, I meditated. Of course, I did my meditation. I sat very obediently, you know, on the chair and meditated. That was lovely. That was a bit like a respite, but it wasn't really taking me anywhere. I was like going into I'm hitting some kind of bliss, but nothing was changing. It was not touching anything within me. It was just taking me somewhere like a poppy, you know, a poppy field in Dorothy. You know, I was just like resting a little bit and then coming back. It wasn't, so it was like almost like a bit of a false light system, but it was nice. Okay. I spent 40 years doing that. And that's it. I felt, and at some point I felt that structure needs to be dismantled. Something needs to happen. It was too painful. I looked at my wedding pictures when I was getting married, when I was young. If you look at my face, it was like a ball of tension. I was like a bomb ready to explode. This is how much tension I held, that shadow, that sort of, you know, those archetypes, they were pushing. Something was really wrong. Something was so discordant, so disconnected. Like on the surface, I'll come across as a very confident, able person, but deep down will be a total wreck. Like it will be such a schism. and nothing in between. So yeah, so basically, as I mentioned before, I felt this ego structure very much in my solar plexus, and I actually had a lot of problems with my solar plexus as I was growing up. I had problems with my pancreas. I had problems with my tummy, you know, because it was like constantly bombarded, and I was constantly groomed to be under pressure to adopt those types of ego structures on myself via the external conditioning. So before my core self could develop, before I could come in touch with my core God spark and core self, the false and fake ego structures were forced upon me. Yes, and it was done by my wounded parents. It was done by the socially accepted norms of behavior within the society. And it was on instigating a mentality of obedience and slavery. So I was brought up in the former USSR. It was a communist regime. I had to obey. I had to become a slave. I, you know, don't question authority, obey and be a good girl. That type of kind of fear-based mentality was implemented. It was reinforced, of course, by inherited stuff. I've inherited a lot of cellular memory and trauma from my sort of genetic lineage, of course, racial, planetary trauma, miasma, everything we talked about at the beginning was also part of it. And of course, ancestral bindings as well. So if you take all this into account, here's the child who is dealing with all this, plus all the conditioning and parental trauma. So of course, these forced identities were almost like a survival mechanism. I needed to adopt them. But they disconnected me, of course, from my heart, from the feeling, from the sensing part of myself. I was groomed not to rely on my intuition. I was groomed to put a lot of emphasis on the mental body, on the, you know, how good you are with your mind, with your intellect. You know, everything which was to do with intellectual achievement was praised, everything. And if you're not intellectual, you're stupid and you will be mocked and you will be bullied. So this is kind of like, you're either intellectual and clever, or that's it, you're not going to survive. So this is kind of social structures. This is kind of like a rigid structure in which I was growing up. It demanded my obedience. It demanded me to submit to it. It did everything. It groomed me from a young age to disconnect from my soul. And of course, it's very interesting that why negative aliens attack our children, like why we as children go through so much trauma via our traumatized parents. Because biological age 12, during puberty, this is the time when our soul is supposed to activate, and we're supposed to connect and activate our fourth strand DNA. But if I'm already damaged before then, there's no way I'm going to do this. So of course, lo and behold, during my puberty, it was the most unhappy period of my life. A lot of self-hate, a lot of suffering, a lot of self-depreciation, self-deprecation. You know, what soul? The soul could never come through to that kind of environment in which I already was groomed to be. If I talk too fast, tell me. If you want to clarify anything, ask me, ladies.
I want to ask you if you can clarify one little piece.
Mm-hmm.
For our list, thank you for all this. It's just wonderful sharing, really learning from what you're saying. Thank you so much. I want to ask if you can clarify for the listeners. I'm pretty clear on it now. It's still a little bit unclear for me, but when we use the term archetype, I just want to make sure for myself a little bit, but for the listeners, that they know what we're talking about when we say that we're playing out these archetypes, because that's a little bit, I would say maybe a little bit confusing to someone who's newly awakening, and they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean when you're playing out the archetypes? Can you maybe just in our own words explain, and any of us can jump in with it, but I just mean that.
Okay. I'm just looking, I'm looking at the Ascension Glossary because it has a very good explanation here. But generally, it's almost like archetypal patterns that exist as a blueprint, and they can be magnetically imprinted upon the soul before it's born into the material world. Like we have, like Carl Jung was the one who kind of opened up the subject of archetypes, and he researched different kind of cultures, and he realized that these kind of like collective archetypes, like the mother, the father, the hero, the savior, yes, the child, the shadow, you know, these are all kind of like archetypes in which we it's almost like the energy needs some sort of expression, and this expression blueprint comes as an archetype. So when we say archetypes, it's almost like giving a form to the particular energetic expression, like archetype of a mother. So we know when we say the mother, we know that the energetic expression will be loving, unconditional, you know, all this kind of like warm, nurturing, or the dark mother. Yes, this is also the archetype. So the archetypes could be good and light archetypes, but they can also be dark archetypes, the negative, the reversal archetypes. And this is what happens through these reversals that happen on our planet. Instead of having a helpful archetypes that are helping us to experience the polarity, we are now having this dark, very dark, negative archetypes that almost suck us in, where we cannot get out of that, because negative archetypes could be destructive.
And that negative use, just to clarify, so that negative archetype then is created for us from the different items that you discussed, such as programming and conditioning. As a child, we learn these destructive patterns, right?
Yes.
So that would be a way to explain what the negative archetype is, instead of expressing ourselves through a positive archetype that can help us. We have learned how to hurt ourselves and to hurt others and to live selfishly through all of this programming, whether it's mind control, you know, the psychotronic weaponry, whether it's family of origin items that we're dealing, you get the full package when you're born into your family of origin, and you're working through all of the negative ego patterning. And then we develop our, I would say we reinforce our own enslavement with all of this, because it just becomes the norm. Would that be accurate to say?
Yes, yes. And usually these archetypes will come under kind of like umbrella of superior or inferior. Yes. So we could have an entitled narcissist will be a superior archetypal negative pattern. And then we can have a kind of like infantile victim, or like a perpetual victim who would be enabling the narcissist as an inferior negative archetype. And they kind of like work together, they enable each other. So the narcissist needs the enabler in order to play the game. And this is how this game, this dysfunctional game, is played. So this is just one example. We have a princess code archetype, you know, this kind of like me, I'm a princess type of thing. So this is the kind of like, again, the reversal archetype of a real feminine values, which is, you know, those beautiful values that we all cherish in a female, but they're being reversed in order to lock the woman into the kind of worshiping her appearance and nothing else, and being hooked on that, and almost like seducing males through the appearance. So this is like the princess. So these are just examples of different archetypes. If you want to mention a few more.
I wanted to ask Linda, because I had a comment, but Linda, did you have something to add?
Yes. So within these archetypes, then what comes up in these archetypes are then our patterns or belief systems. So just to give an example, I was just thinking of the trickster archetype, or it's like that Joker trickster. And so this sort of behavior type person or archetype, you know, they create chaos, you know, chaos disruptor it's called, you know, so they're like, they turn up and they can, you know, they'll just wreak havoc. And so, you know, and it really is about archetypes of drama. When I read that about this archetypes of drama, I was like, this is it. This is, someone has this archetype that then feeds someone else's archetype. Drama, 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 all over the place. It's like, wow, you know, so these patterns of behavior are basically keep feeding these archetypes. You know, it's just like this endless circle, isn't it, that we have? So that's what was coming to mind. Yeah, that was it.
I wanted to mention quickly, I'm going to try to express this. This is part of what I studied, and it's important that I understand it. So I'm going to try to spit it out quickly here.
Go ahead.
But it ties in with exactly what we're saying. And it's that the human prototype is, the way I understood it, is polarized purposefully. And if we remember the destruction that we talked about, and then the human prototype was here to help repair and to help bring back the fragments. There is, in a way, my understanding, if I'm understanding it correctly, that there is a purpose on some levels for the polarized human to be able to exist within this polarity realm consciousness. But so we have access to the darkness and we're living within that, but we also have access on some levels, when we can tap into it and recover it, access to the God force, because we are, I would say, God infused. We are connected in with the heart of God. We're God beings. And I am sorry if that may offend some people or some beings. It's not any kind of I'm better than you. I'm just trying to explain the human prototype. This is what it is. So it is really quite amazing. I'm so thrilled to be able to have this experience for that reason. I just wanted to mention that because maybe, and I'd like to hear what both of you have to say on this, but maybe what the information is trying to say to us is that we're polarized beings for that reason, because we have the ability to synthesize. We have to be able to, I would say, maybe connect in with both sides, because it is what happened. We came from this, we were polarized into that. We need to synthesize it all together to collect the fragments, everything that's lost and strewn out into the ethers and these unknown spaces. We need to, so that's the alchemical gift of the human. So I suppose, you know, you've got all of this craziness happening on planet Earth, and maybe the goal is to then bring everything back into balance. And of course, we talk about 0 point a lot, because you've got God, that which we are. We're extensions of God. We're just these unique expressions and unique extensions of God, that which we are, expressing itself in these different realms. Okay. And so, but then when all is said and done, we merge back into the oneness. We merge back into the 0 point, which is everything, which is nothing, which is all, which is, okay, there's that big mystery of the God consciousness. So I don't know if that explained it well enough. I wanted to add that piece because that was a piece of the information of the human prototype that I was researching.
Yeah.
Yes, the tree.
Yeah.
It was clear. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Because I was like, you wrap your head around this kind of stuff, but
it's very, you explained it so clear. And what came to me is like yeah, Trinity. Human is the Trinity field, polarity integrator. Yes, we integrate polarities. We have this 0 point, like you said, God spark, connection to the source. Trinity emerges from that. So we're a triune field, which enables us to integrate the polarities, and alchemize and transmute something which is dark, transmute it into the light. So yeah, well said. That's exactly us. So we really are very special human beings, angelic human race. We're very special, and it's something to be really, and we're very loved. It's yeah, so we just need to remember that, because it's sometimes difficult to, I forget sometimes. It's difficult to remember at all times how loved and cherished we are by our progenitors and guardians and protectors.
And
of love.
our hope is that this sharing that we're doing here, Trinity and Linda, is we're trying to say, fellow humans, you are this as well. May
Yes.
this motivate you to
Yes.
open up to the information and you know, let it resonate. Just may it be a little bit of a, I don't know, seed planting for you to begin your journey back into wholeness.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Okay, so I will continue a little bit with my sharing. So I've already mentioned that the educational system was geared in order to make us all very mentalized, to have this kind of highly mentalized approach, which of course is very easily manipulated then. And it has made me very vulnerable in later life. This is interesting. So this kind of like brainwashing and upbringing in my childhood made me, in my later life, constantly wanting to seek approval based on my intellectual capabilities. I was hooked on getting the external approval and validation. So here we go. This is the, you know, the dependency, the disconnection from my own core self, where I needed constantly a fix, external fix, to help me feel that I am approved or validated or loved. And it was always hurting me if I were like perceived as stupid. And I carried a lot of pain, and my ego was protecting. I would never allow anyone to even think that. So I will work very hard. I'll have a burnout. I will like, you know, and I was also very susceptible to consciousness traps. Sonia mentioned consciousness traps before at the beginning, but yes, I was in many of them, because each time a little carrot will dangle and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get another diploma. Oh, I'm gonna get another certificate. Oh, I'm gonna go for another degree. Oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. And I was like constantly locked in this perpetual cycle of approval seeking and validation seeking via the external hooking on this kind of, so aliens really had me, you know, they had me nicely, because the times in my life that I could have been really doing my work, maybe doing and enjoying my life, I was constantly seeking approval via studying or pushing myself into these intellectual pursuits. And it was all done in order to reinforce the kind of false identity. This is the false archetype of intellectual or intelligence or clever, you know, mental body prize. And the more healing I was doing on myself, the more I realized, when I started really digging deeper and meditating and using the ES tools and really looking at the reclamation process of my soul, collecting all those pieces, looking at my dreams, what came to me is that there was some kind of Luciferian binding with my, you know, within my family, to do with this intellectual push towards the intellectual kind of everything. If you're clever, you're praised. It was to the extent of almost disconnection from the heart, you know, the sacrifices that were made in order to sort of worship this god of intellect, or whatever you call it. And this was almost like an ownership tag, which was, I was tagged from birth.
Mm-hmm.
I was born into the family that had that type of Luciferian binding. I had no choice as the firstborn but to follow this program of being highly intellectualized. I don't know if you could relate to some of it. also the culture, the communist culture in which I was brought up, was kind of reinforcing and emphasizing highly polarized thought forms. It was everywhere. It was in written form, it was in spoken and visual, it was through media, it was through the kind of cultural trends, how people were behaving, the propaganda.
Yeah.
Everything was done to somehow kind of create this highly polarized kind of like master slave, yes, rich and poor. Sort of imbalance. And it created a lot of hidden kind of resentment, anger, because on one hand, I'm taught that, you know, poverty is actually quite good. Poverty, you know, it's good to be poor. And if you are, you know, rich, that's actually a disgrace. And yet I was observing that a lot of communist elite, they were very rich,
Yeah, right.
and we were very poor. So my child's mind was like, this is the dissonance going on here. So how am I going to negotiate this dissonance? I feel something's wrong, but I can't really speak it. I can't, you know, don't I dare? I mean, if I do, gulag or something else. Is like a very fear-based program, you know, society. So that created a lot of hidden kind of anger, confusion, rage, you know, observing that injustice. All that was deposited into the pain body and then became my shadow body. And I wouldn't look at it. I'd rather go and do another course and another degree than look into my shadow body. And this is exactly what my father did. You know, this is just like a generational pattern here. And this was disconnecting me from more and more from my core self. I just could not feel. I mean, I don't know how I survived. I don't know how my heart didn't actually explode. I don't know what was holding me. Maybe my meditation somehow was pacifying me. But I was really disconnecting more and more from my core self. And also sort of somehow deluding myself that I'm spiritual and that because I'm meditating, that I'm kind of walking towards the enlightenment. You know, I was very interested in Eastern philosophy, so I read and practiced yoga and did a lot of, so somehow it was kind of a bit of a self-delusional trip where I was bypassing my shadow. I was too scared. I didn't have any skills, any tools, how to deal with it. And of course, this kind of like denial of my feeling happened from a very young age. It was just like, that's what you do. You do not express, you do not, you know, you do not feel. I remember even like, I wasn't even, somehow I didn't cry. If I needed to cry, I would go somewhere privately and nobody could see me and I will just cry, but it was very rarely. I mean, can you imagine how the level of tension and, you know, everything that comes in needs to come out. So in my case, everything was going in and nothing was coming out. So I was like, really like becoming very, very packed with all those shadow feelings and thoughts. Just trying to see. Yeah, I was bullied, of course, you know, my vulnerability, because I was not in touch with my vulnerability. And by then I already kind of became such a kind of closed off, disconnected self that I wouldn't even, if somebody was abusing me, I wouldn't even see it as an abuse. I would see it as like, oh, okay. I wouldn't feel, you know, I wouldn't have my radar system. Everything was totally messed up. It was like, we're talking puberty now. So of course I was bullied. The teachers at school were very Gestapo-like, you know, Heil Hitler, you know, stuff. Not all. I'm not saying all. We had few good teachers, but you know, some of the teachers, oh my God, you know, that was like PTSD just from that.
Wow.
So a lot of humiliation, a lot of sort of taking advantage by people in power, people in authority. I wouldn't even, you know, go anywhere near the government authorities or, you know, police or whatever. It was just like a no-go. You don't even talk to them. You know, I'm just talking teachers. So of course, my false identities were taking care. I was developing this kind of false identities: happy go, happy face, you know, stay meek, accommodate, don't confront, you know, don't confront authority, be a peacemaker. If somebody you know, hits you, put another cheek, you know, all that type of stuff. But my natural self, my core self, of course, was kind of like, hey, you know, this is not right. This shouldn't be happening. But it was all pushing into the shadow. So it was a very painful existence. So I just want to kind of give an example of these false forced identities or archetypes that we were talking. I had a very strong, and I'm still kind of wrestling with them. I'm still kind of integrating them, but it's like the obedient slave is one of them, the pleaser, the martyr. This is my kind of primary archetypes. Overly responsible, you know, a good girl, rescuer, savior. You know, we talk about hero savior complex. I had it all. You know, still have to watch. You know, trying to save, trying to rescue, accommodator, pleaser, non-confrontational, slave and servant. Here we go. This is my profile. This is what I was existing most of my life on these archetypes. Good job, negative aliens. They did a good job, because this is if you want to have an obedient slave, this is they've done the job, because I may show, you know, I may present myself as confident, but as soon as you kind of call my bluff, I will sink and I will submit, and I will just quietly. There was no dignity, there was no skills of self-expression, none of that. So this is what I was just about to say about self-expression and how these forced identities gave me a very damaged sense of self. My self-worth was non-existent. It was just totally broken. And it kind of gave me this dysfunctional belief that I'm not worthy. So it's like, unless I play these identities, unless I play these archetypal patterns, I'm not worthy of existence. I mean, this is how bad, this is what these archetypes have done to my core self. And I remember when I was a teenager, I was like, hey, when I looked at my diaries, when I was writing, when I was a teenager, there's a lot of like, I hate you, I hate myself, I hate, look at you, look at this, look at the, you know, constant self-criticism, constant hate. And this was the spirit of hate turning on inner God spirit within me. So I was almost like turning on myself because of all these forced identities and because of this shadow, because of this confusion, not having any guidance, being left, this kind of like dealing with it all on my own. So this was quite painful, and maybe some people could relate to that. And I always felt like, oh my God, if people find out what I'm really like, they won't like me.
Oh yeah.
Of course they won't like me. They'll abandon me. They'll kill me or whatever. They will just, because of course I never knew what my core identity was. I never had a chance. There was always force. It's like when I was about like a baby, somebody just puts a cosmonaut suit on me and says, okay, now you're going to be in this. And I totally forget that I actually have a skin, that I actually have my body without this costume. This costume has become such part of me, and it was basically replaced my core self with this false ego construct, and convinced me that my core self is not welcome in this reality. So to be and express my core self was dangerous and unsafe. That's the message. So it's safer to play this false reality constructs. So a lot of sort of negative thought forms was generated for this. It gave me a lot of, you know, I was quite an ill child, you know. When I was a child, I was ill, and then as a teenager, you know, gave me digestive problems, depression, you know, I was constantly anxious, you know, this kind of negative forms, so you know, constant fear, trying to protect myself. I had friends, but I always had this facade, and then I'll just disconnect from my friends, and I won't know why. I was very volatile, very kind of like, you know, one day I'm happy, another day it's like, honestly, when I look back, it was just so unhappy period of my life. And of course, this was all planned because obviously my fourth strand soul matrix could not activate during puberty. Instead, I had my astral dream manipulation, siphoning of my energy, you know, all these ego constructs were reinforcing themselves. My creative energies were stolen and hijacked, you know. It was just not a good time. And it continued into my sort of 20s, into my 30s. Always suffer from digestive issues, parasites, you know, candida, all that type of stuff. Wake up in the morning and my mental body would tell me, you know, I would have this kind of weird experiences in my dreams where I would see these weird people coming to me like in white coats, taking samples from my teeth, from my kind of parts of my body. It's kind of like happened since I remember, since like puberty. Weird dreams. And then of course, you know, again, how do I deal with it? I wake up in the morning, oh, it's not happening to me. It's not, it's an illusion. It's just like my mental body just tells, oh, forget it. It's so it's like turn on myself. So I think it's only sort of early 40s that I was able to really have courage to really look into my shadow body. And it wasn't by choice. I was pushed into that by an experience that I had, which I shared in my other podcasts with the Anunnaki hybrid. I mean, we talked about that this kind of like dark nights of the soul, and when this kind of karmic soulmate turns up, it always brings up, for me, it was a major shadow clearing, and shadow is like, I could no longer repress that shadow. So in some ways it was good, but in some ways it was very painful because everything just exploded, everything. So I went through, again, depression, chronic depression. So I'm just trying to put the relevant things. I mean, do you want to ask anything whilst I'm looking? I realized that sorry, did you want to ask anything?
Yeah, I wanted to say that, Linda, you want to go first? Did you have something?
No, you go.
When you were saying that you were packing everything down, like what goes in has to come out, but the sort of routine that was learned was to pack it in and not release very well. Would this be an example, a good example for our listeners to help connect the dots when we're talking about fragmentation?
Yes.
When we keep pushing down the pain and we're not releasing it, and when we keep covering up the true identity of who we are, this is causing soul splitting. This is what we mean by that. If our listeners can imagine, what does it mean by soul fragmentation? It means just that. You get further and further away from your God connection. It actually, I imagine if you could see it etherically with a third eye vision, you might actually see splinters and fragmentations and pieces floating around. But if you can't see that, then you can feel it. What it is it's a deep disconnection. And so is that a good example? You were fragmenting yourself by pushing down the feelings, the hatred that you were feeling, the depression, the sorrow, the pain. You were pushing that in. Was that fragmenting you?
Yes, because these little pockets existed separate from each other, and it's like different rooms in the psyche, totally kind of locked. So I go to one room, I come out, shut the door, that's it doesn't exist. And I go to another room, and these kind of like rooms are supposed all to communicate and have kind of, you know, flow and interact, but defragmentation is when they don't interact. And that's exactly what happened. And they were like false, disconnected identities or altars that I was putting on. Yeah, so today I'm going to be a martyr. Okay. Tomorrow I'm going to be a pleaser, you know, and the day after I'm going to be something else, you see, and this is all altars. But my core identity is neither of that. Yeah, my core identity is not that at all, but it's locked, it's kind of it's shut off from, and that's this kind of constant sense that I'm fake. I don't really, like, even when I say I love you, it's just like it's fake, because I don't, when I say I love you, which identity is saying this? Is it the matter saying this? Who is saying this? So it's quite a painful state to exist. So I realized through all this experience that I haven't developed natural skills, like the skill to self-express. Self-expression was not safe, so I wouldn't know how to self-express. My self-expression was like very kind of polarized. I'm going to be happy or I'm going to be angry. That's it. Nothing in between. No skill how to set boundaries, how to sort of have dignity, how to, generally how to express myself. So I'm just trying to, because partially the reason for that also was that I didn't really have anyone to express it to, because obviously my parents, they were busy with their own trauma and with their own things. So I didn't have a listening ear to express it to, and my self-worth was so low that I felt, well, even if I do express, who wants to hear me? I'm so unimportant. I'm so unworthy. I will eagerly listen to other people expressing, because that was the matter. But I wouldn't, you see, I wouldn't express. So do you see this schism kind of?
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can identify with that.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of us in our childhoods, we weren't able to express. There was no self-expression, and there was no honesty or transparency about feelings. You know, it was pretty dysfunctional. You know, we weren't taught how to express ourselves, really. It was like, you know, just keep it all down, keep it in. Don't be truthful, don't be honest. Oh no, that's, you know.
Yes.
You know, then fear, obviously we'll probably have a lot of fear, don't we, of you know, from our mother or father or some other sibling, you know, and then that fear comes into play, and then that really just starts creating more of it. You know, how are we going to be, you know, these self-responsible adults? It just carries on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, once these patterns of behavior that we learn as a child, you know, it's then I can identify exactly what you're saying. I had the same, you know, I was just keep everything in. You know, it was very internalized, very, very internalized.
Yes, yes.
There was, you know, you don't express anything, you know, there was nothing to say. And, you know, I think also for me, I had that, I was a parent to my mother. I was her sounding board.
Yes.
You know, I was already this sensitive, empathic child, you know, and I was the only one around her, you know, and I didn't really have a big family, but for her to express herself, it was like from a young age. And also because she was hard of hearing, I was her ears as well. So, you know, it was, yeah, I could just really identify with this whole childhood thing. It just really sets you up.
Yeah, I totally agree. And yes, it's a kind of like, seems like this type of experience is not just mine. It seems to be a kind of collective experience. So yeah, I just want to say that, sorry?
Thank you for your honesty. Thank you.
Well, you know, I'm glad, because I hope that other people could relate and put things together, yes, to sort of connect how it manifests. I just want to say that obviously our planet existed without, you know, because of all the damage we had. I don't know if we mentioned this before, but the archetype and the forces and actually the energetic presence of the father, the divine father and mother, yes, it was not on a planet.
Right.
It only, as far as I kind of learned from ES, that the mother energy only kind of was able to manifest on this planet since 2013. And I'm sure the father sort of also maybe earlier or maybe a little later, not quite sure, the father, but we have both now on the planet. So it's interesting, when we were growing up, obviously my parents were quite damaged, were PTSD'd, you know, and I remember this sense of orphanage. I felt like an orphan. I felt my parents were orphans, and I felt an orphan. And it's interesting, sort of, in hindsight, when I learned that the mother wasn't on the planet, it's like, of course, it made sense to me. My father called me a mother. Yeah, he was, and I was so sorry for him. He felt so orphaned, like he had a physical mother, but she was not able to bring, because the mother wasn't on the planet. It was very difficult probably for women to really bring that frequency to their children. So this mother-child bond wasn't how it should have been. How many of us had happy parenting, you know? I mean, I'm sure there were good mothers, but not many of them. So this is what's interesting. For me, it was an interesting insight to learn from the ES, and it put few dots, so connected few dots for me. So because of my lack of expression, I'm sticking with expression because it's kind of, I think it's the key in all that, because it's the key. The shadow loves to be hidden. The shadow body, the ego, it loves to work hidden under the, you know, somewhere in the shadows and darkness. And our self-expression enables us to call it out. So you see, my self-expression was almost disabled from a young age, and that made my shadow so huge and so painful. So that's why I'm sticking to the self-expression and trying to show how much discord, imbalance, and pain this brought me. So again, if we're talking about setting healthy boundaries with people, not just my romantic partners, but just with, you know, with ordinary people in life, it was very, I was totally unable to do that. So I would be repeatedly emotionally violated, and sometimes even physically. And I wouldn't even, as I said, I wouldn't even see it as a violation because my boundaries were so messed up. And I wouldn't be able to have, my mata will immediately kick in, the Stockholm syndrome will kick in and start justifying my abuses and denying the reality of the abuse. Exactly what's happening now in the outerscape, where people just in disbelief, just as accepting this false parent government narrative, telling them that the vaccine is going to be fantastic and they're going to be, you know, these nonsensical lockdowns and this kind of like nonsensical rules that they are implementing under the pretext of pandemic, this false parent narrative. This is exactly what I was brainwashed to kind of never question and obey and experience this kind of violations and pushing of the boundary and taking it meekly, just like, okay, this is my mata. My mata was happy to do that. This is learned helplessness. This is here we go. So this is all. I had no voice. I had no dignity. Slave mentality. I mean, I can't even, you know, how can I talk to the master? You know, they know what they're doing. I wouldn't even, you know, question them. So this is all was part of that. I will freeze if somebody, you know, if somebody asks me for my opinion, I will just freeze, or I will just become unfocused, or I'll just say something very general. Or if somebody asks me, what do you want? I'll say, I don't mind. I don't mind was my favorite word. Rather than saying, I prefer this, I like this, I don't like this. No, I will say, I don't mind, whatever. Here we go. So this is kind of like, was my existence, painful existence, a lot of trauma. And that obviously created a lot of repressed anger. And rage. And looking back now, the way how I was like with my daughter, I love my daughter dearly. She's my beautiful friend. But when I look back how I was talking to her sometimes, not even being angry, but it was in my voice, poor girl will just look at me. And I wasn't even telling her off. I was just saying something to her in a firm way, which to me was firm. But she told me that she kind of sensed that anger in my voice, and it wasn't even directed at her. So this pent-up anger, this pent-up rage was interfering into my relationship with my daughter, and interfering into my bonding. I mean, luckily, you know, we're very honest with each other, and we were able to get through this. But, you know, it's kind of like, yes, it was such a strong energy inside me, which did not have a way to get itself out. And of course, my relationship with family, with partners, it was all kind of shadowed by this kind of schism of anger and fluctuation of this kind of falsity. And I am one person when I'm outside, I come home, I'm a different person. You know, it's just like total imbalance, total schism. So yeah, so this is what I wanted to sort of say on a little bit on this archetypal ego identities and shadow body. And then also wanted to move a little bit maybe into more of my light body work that I have done since I joined the ES and started sort of integrating the material and started looking at these timelines and using the Ascension Glossary as a divination tool, trying to sort of ask for guidance to guide me to see what do I need to clear, what do I need to clear today or this month and usually it'll kind of work. It took time for the system to kick in, but it's kind of worked. So what transpired to me that in the last maybe 6 to 7 years, my shadow self, my kind of negative forms and the kind of inverted soul matrix, everything that was damaged as a result of our galactic history, was linked sort of, I was processing the destruction of Tara, you know, that the Tara and the Gaia, the two planets that existed before the Earth was after the explosion of them. I was processing the timelines associated with the destruction of those planets, and also some kind of Atlantean holocausts, floods, a lot of sort of Atlantean material as well. It was very interesting. And the most painful trauma that I think I've been processing maybe from childhood is this kind of loss of our wings, the wing trauma, we call it, but it's a male-female split. That's what Sonia was saying, that we are actually two suns, male and female are the two suns, and we're supposed to merge and we're supposed to create this Trinity. But of course, for all this damage in all of us, it was split, you know, the rod and the staff, you know, the mother and the father, the female and male, electron proton, it was split, and it was very traumatic. And I, you know, always had like a lot of pain on my left side, still have, you know. We might talk about the implants later, but it's all to do with this healing the damaged female and healing the damaged male and uniting and integrating them. So that's been also the theme for me of reclamation and healing the pieces. And I've realized that every partner I had in my life was a piece that I needed to heal in order to reclaim parts of my male, damaged inner male son body, what Sonia said. So that was interesting. Recent piece for me was the Melchizedek clearing, healing, closure of this timeline, completion of the Melchizedek fall and Melchizedek digression. I'll just mention a few words to our listeners about the Melchizedek. They could actually have a look on the glossary, but it's actually a gestalt, an energetic gestalt, a sound field. It's a tribe and a sound tone of the Blu-ray source field. So when we talked about our progenitors and our triune ray structure, the Blu-ray is one of the primal rays, and it's a part of the threefold founder flame. So the Melchizedeks, they were the Gestalt collective that came into this density in order to host the previous ascension cycle, the 35,000 years. Melchizedeks were here in order to assist the planet, but instead they became fallen. They fell and became fallen Melchizedeks. And the reason they fell is that because they joined the Anunnaki resistance and acquired and disconnected from the female principle, became sort of acquired a patriarchal slant. And that was very relevant to my family of origin, very relevant to this kind of emphasis on the intellectualism at the cost of the losing the heart connection. I could sort of intuitively and through dreamscape sort of started collecting some of these pieces I'm in the process of collecting them. So this is kind of my current sort of recollection of Melchizedek and closing of the Melchizedek and stepping into the power of the female, like what Sonia was saying. I liked how Sonia described it, the female and the male sun within us, integrated into the oneness and creating this unity field is a Melchizedek. So we are all Melchizedeks, really. So this is how I'm kind of clearing my shadow synchronistically, allowing the guardians to present with the peace, whatever peace needs to come into my awareness. And it's kind of like quite spiral process. I never know what's going to come next. So just to summarize and to round up, just to say that my current shadow work involves clearing genetic and galactic memory of patriarchal oppression and abuse inflicted by the totalitarian state. This is my Megiddo battle shadow, which is going to present itself, I know. It's to do with facing and standing up to the totalitarian regime on a collective level for my family, because my family has been through like Russian Revolution, First and Second World War, you know, concentration camps, Stalin Holocaust, you know, Ukrainian kind of Holodomor, which is when people were like starved to death in the Ukraine. So my family been through all this, and none of them ever said anything bad about the state.
Wow.
This is incredible. I mean, you ask my nan, she loves Stalin. She thinks he's God. This is mind control. I mean, this is it. And I want to say to people that, you know, why Stalin was able to get away with killing and taking, you know, coming and turning people, that the son will grasp their own father, because people were silent. Nobody resisted. People just meekly and silently went, believing that Stalin was right. This was mind control. And they're trying to pull it here now in the West, similar type of scenario. So I just want to warn that people have to resist when dictatorship and tyranny is approaching. People have to resist, because if they don't, we already had it all in Russia. Look at Russian history and look how many people died, how many people went to Gulag when Stalin was in power. So this is my current piece, which is quite relevant to me. So on this, I'm going to close. If you want to clarify anything, do. Otherwise, maybe we could move and discuss a little bit, give some tips how our listeners could help themselves to clear their shadow and this ego, identities, negative ego and shadow. Over to you, Linda.
Oh, thank you.
If there is nothing nothing more to add.
It's really interesting. It's really, it's amazing to hear someone's journey. It's just so rewarding, really, you know, to see what we do, you know, as humans. Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for holding the space for me, and you know, thank you the audience as well. And it's kind of almost like cathartic. It's giving me voice. It's giving me expression. I'm actually, for the first time in my life, I'm like, wow, I can express, and I have these beautiful sisters listening, and that's it. I'm not afraid. Whatever. That's it. The fear. I mean, maybe there is just tiny bit. But it's, you know, well, I have no, you know, sorry, Sonia.
I wanted to say that before Linda moves in with her tips, since it's on that note, then let me just say, because I was going to wait, but I will also say, you know, echo what Linda just said, that, you know, it was so helpful for me to hear your story. I'm grateful for you to have shared the way you did. I guarantee that I would bet money, just as a joke, I don't want to, but I'd bet money that your story is very similar to tons and tons and tons of people. And because you had the courage to come forward and actually express it, it then kind of plants a seed for these people who are just awakening to have the courage to also express and come forward and, you know, unpack the trauma.
Yeah.
So congratulations on this cathartic experience, even though I'm sorry if it's painful, but I really feel that it's going to, for all of us, when we do this, it opens doors. It just lets the light in, right? Because we're getting rid of the darkness and we're letting in the light. So thank you again so much for that.
Yeah, it's like feel the fear and do it anyways. It's like,
Yeah.
right, that's it. I'm gonna go for it because it's like I have nothing to lose. It's and it's more painful to remain in that darkness. So
Yeah.
it's quite liberating. It's quite liberating to have that experience of expressing. Yeah. Okay. Thank you both for acknowledging.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you both.
Thank you. Yes.
Shadow clearing tips. Sonia, I think was that key word, courage, and Trinity, shine the light. The liberation. The more we're striving for our true sovereignty and liberation, these really are the antidotes of the shadow. And so what, these like pillars of truth, this light that starts coming into the shadow, it helps us dismantle the ego, and it dismantles the shadow. And okay, so tips, it's a huge area. Okay, keep it simple here. Placing awareness of our ego behaviors. So self-awareness every single day, every thought that you have, every feeling, self-awareness, self-forgiveness. Where are your thoughts coming from? Looking at your patterns of behavior, and over again, daily basis. This is what's gonna elevate us. This is what gives us more courage. Breath by breath, step by step. It's looking at our fear-based programs, looking at our fear-based beliefs. This will loosen the satanic and Luciferian structures that that have been built in our false house, in our false beliefs, in our false everything. It really does. It really just puts a stop to it. It's just like we're reclaiming. It's like, no more. Enough is enough. And once you reach that, you start feeling that in your heart. The whole dismantling starts happening, and it's circular, it's spherical. What's the word I'm looking for? Spiraling. Mm-hmm. So all of us, the three of us have got this age now where we're almost 50. So we've had these phases. We've had a lot of dismantling over the years, but I think even more so it's speeded up from 2012. I'd say for a lot of us out there, from 2012 it's like, right, time's now, come on now. This is it now. So we've really, we as Ascension, we're helping humanity, we're helping each other in unity, and this is what it's about.
Can I just add something very briefly that I forgot to mention when I was doing, and it's just to mention to our audience that actually the 7 houses of ego, they are also called 7 demonic houses, and each one of them has a demonic entity, Luciferian or satanic, attached to it. I didn't mention this, but okay, so that's all I wanted to say. So addiction, lust, rage, vengeance, greed, avarice, all have their designated Luciferian and satanic entities. So when I was hating myself, when I was a teenager, I was actually inviting the spirit of hate inside me. That's it. And when I was eating a lot because I was so unhappy and emotionally deprived, so I was like binging, I was inviting the spirit of gluttony. and the spirit of laziness and the spirit of apathy and discouragement. Okay, that's all I wanted to add.
So how would we counteract that then, Linda, do you think, or Trinity?
Eviction. Yeah, we evict these demonic forces. You know, we lovingly commanding. We have, you know, you can have your own commands. You just command on a daily basis. You know, I lovingly decree that every part of my body, every part of my soul, every part of my being belongs to me. It's about self-ownership. So, you know, we're on this self-ownership path now. We're on the self-sovereignty path. So, you know, the biggest tip that I can say is asking for these parts to come back and evicting these demonic forces. You know, and with evicting them, you know, it's like, oh, well, I evict the spirit of gluttony. So within that also is the self-awareness, you know, your daily work, the daily grind that you have to do in helping that eviction is, okay, so, you know, looking at yourself and being totally honest and transparent, what you can do to evict these demonic houses and what are the antidotes. So, oh yeah, so I was going to mention the spirits of Christ. So we have number 1, purity, number 2, generosity, number 3, patience, kindness, discipline, conservation for number 5. We also have the 6th spirit of Christ, which is diligence, humility. Also, you know, there are many more positive spirits that can help us and support us as we evict and dismantle these houses, these 3 lower 8 layers of ego. So yeah, did that sort of answer your question?
It did. It did. It's really a good explanation of what we can do, you know, to how do we traverse or navigate our own healing path. I mean, these are some steps that we can use because the things we talked about today are the reality of the situation. Okay, well, how on earth do we go about getting down to business here? And so you provide for us some good ways to do that, Linda. And something that you said.
Sorry, what's also I just want to add. Sorry, yeah. I just want to add before I look at it quickly. To add to that is, oh, see, I knew it was about to go. Like, be there.
Well, think about it, and as I talk, it might come back in, and just chime in when it comes.
I do not consent. This is it. So when it comes to self-ownership, this is it. I do not consent. You know, we have given away our consent unknowingly. And I think this is, you know, front and center now. Yes. And when we're looking at what's happening in the external landscape is, are we going to consent to all of this, what's happening? And if we don't consent, then we have to actually feel that and say it and do it on a daily basis. What are we consenting to? You know, because, you know, if you are consenting to these demonic houses within your being, you know, then that's just going to carry on in the outer landscape, you know. So what we can do within ourselves to, you know, I do not consent to, you know, spirit gluttony. I do not consent, you know, to this pattern of behavior that I feel that, you know, I've learned, and therefore, you know, the grip just loosens once you putting down your boundary to say, I don't consent to this within myself anymore. I do not allow it anymore. In a very self-loving and a self-forgiving way. Sorry for butting there, but yeah, okay, it came back.
Yeah, it's important. I'm glad that it came back because that's exactly correct. That's what we have to do, you know. And you know, is it harming us? Is it hurting us? Is it causing some kind of dysfunction in our lives? Well, that's the key. That's the key right there. And then we can say, I do not consent with this anymore. And then we can say, I evict you out. And then something you also said that, you know, it caught my attention was the daily grind of doing the work. Doing the work. It's really important to mention that. the three of us can attest to this, that it takes work. Consciousness, repairing and healing our consciousness takes work because of the mind control, because of the, we have just
false identity.
the false
The false
identities.
identity will take us out of that if we allow it.
And the false
Yeah.
bliss, the false bliss,
False
the
bliss.
false
Oh,
kind
that's
of
a good one.
fireworks, fireworks of the blissful state. And obviously the astral plane manipulation is amazing, the way how they can sort of put things into your dreamscape, give you some kind of visions, and it's very, it's high. You feel very high, you feel very, and if the ego isn't transcended, or if the ego isn't worked on, it's very easy to get carried away with all these different narratives that are being, especially the younger starseeds and those people who are awakening, younger generation. So many of them are being pulled into this kind of false bliss,
Spiritual ego.
spiritual ego, and
Oh, yeah.
all sorts of different obstacles on their path to really connect and with their purpose here and do what they need to do. So just really, spirits of Christ are safe to work with, even if it's just once a day. Just choose a spirit and focus on it for a day, and allow it to sort of absorb into your aura, feel how it's absorbing into your energy field, and contemplate and feel it. I found this as a very useful tool to practice. I definitely feel stronger. I definitely notice when I don't do it. It's almost like my energy field is not as strong. It's like they're like sentinels. They come and they imbue the energy field with some strength and color. So good, yeah. Just work with the spirits of Christ.
Did we actually list, Linda? Did you actually list those? Did you actually say 1, 2, 3, the seven spirits of Christ? You did already? Okay. I know we had mentioned it somehow, but I couldn't remember if you actually listed them. So that's good. And yeah, and so there's just a couple of things that I can add then, because it's already been really well said here. And I would say that, just have some kind of a, I would recommend some kind of a structured daily routine. Again, don't fall into like a mental body enslavement of I have to do this, and like I'm a drone and I have to have this schedule that I follow, because you always want to be connected in with the heart, and it's always a heart resonance with it. But if you want to be free, and you want out of this enslavement matrix, then you will feel motivated to do this. And that's what I do, and I have my own routine, and I listen to meditations, when I'm called to do so. And, it's really, every person is on a different level of this, and that's okay. You have to be okay with that. But, my thing was self-contemplation all the time, contemplating, okay, wow, was that a thinking error? Wow, was I in pain? Was I in fear with that? Because again, we talked about fear being something that really pulls us down into the tar pits. It keeps us there. And if we're going to be subjected to and allow that in, even though we have been conditioned to do so, it's very difficult to try to break free from that. But hopefully by our sharing here, we're slowly dismantling, and we're setting examples of, you can start to question, you can start questioning the system and all of the dysfunction around you. We don't have to just accept it, as a mind control programming, or accepting it out of fear because we feel that we're not worthy or allowed to say something. Get with a trusted friend, even talk with yourself. I mean, I would talk with myself mostly. I would just go over, things that bothered me, and I would say, okay, how do I want to do this differently? Because I don't like it about myself. And I'm not these false identities that have been projected upon me. And the last thing that I would say for all of us would be that, when we talk about the archetypes, and Trinity, you beautifully explained what an archetype is for our listeners, and that we can identify with those, and we have to be careful with what we're identifying with. And we want to get back to 0 point, but we want to be able to also express ourselves. So this is a way to do it. But if we're getting trapped in these consciousness traps of the the lower mind archetypes and keeping us in pain and spiraling there, that's not good, unless you like that. But I don't think that you do. Most people do not like that, and you don't want to be there. Okay, you want to be free of that. And one of the things that I would say that all of us, for myself and all of us, could be, I would say, wary of, could be aware of. We should be aware of the hero savior archetype. And the reason I mention that is because we have to do the work. This goes back to what Linda was saying about you've got to do that daily grind. You've got to get in there and you've got to do the work. It's very important. The hero savior archetype, what it does is it takes the focus off ourselves and it puts it on somebody else. And although there may be some truth to us being here to help others and hold space for others, there could be a lot of truth to that, and that's okay. Like if you're doing disclosure work, or if you're doing, I don't know, if you're an ascension guide, if you're doing field work, whatever field work, session work, etc. It may be very true that you are here to hold that space, and that should be celebrated and embraced. To me, it should be. But there is a bit of a warning with that. And that is that we cannot force people to change or to clear or to heal any faster than they are willing to do so. First of all, if you present something to someone and they don't want to hear it, the mind control is just going to be, they're like a robot, and they get really nervous, and they're programmed to be turned off by that, and they walk away, or they become angry, and they'll say that's a bunch of BS or whatever it is. So we don't want to force anything on anybody. The cosmic plasma light is coming down into the planet to dissolve the mind control barriers so that we can authentically connect in with our own unique core center self. This has to be a natural organic process for everybody. Okay. But with all of that said, we have to be aware of anybody who might be parasitizing us and leaning on us too much. We don't ever want to, in my opinion, and both of you please share after I say this, but we don't ever want to be someone who is taking the load off from holding space. Is different than taking on someone else's path, taking on someone else's burdens. That's very different, in my opinion. That person needs to take the reins of their own consciousness and say, I'm ready to do this, or I'm not ready to do this, and that should be honored. But that person has to do that, because hierogamic union within happens when we are the master of our own ship, and we are the ones that are doing the work, the daily grind, like Linda mentioned. We are the ones that are taking the steps to dismantle these illusions and this ego programming. That's how hierogamic union within, unity within, the unifying of the two suns, the sacred feminine, the sacred masculine, happens. We come into oneness and to wholeness, and we can reconnect back into the heart of God. And then we are then having an impact on the universal consciousness as well, helping to heal the raw consciousness, this beautiful sun that exploded, and the two suns get to come back together, that type of thing. So that was something very important to me that I needed to mention. And if either of you have anything to say on that, please share.
I just like to chime. Sorry, Linda, do you want to say first? I just wanted to add very briefly to what Sonia said. A hero-savior complex doesn't just apply to saving other people, it also applies to saving the planet, to saving the universe, to saving, God creation, humanity. It applies to this kind of more like wider concepts as well. And very often those who came here, those maybe who are Stasis, who came here with a specific mission from small m, not capital M. It's just like came here with a job to do. They almost feel that sense of, oh my God, I've got to be doing something. I've got to be doing something. I've got to be helping. I've got to be doing, because something in their light body, in their soul matrix, will kind of keep nudging them and activating them. So there is a very fine line between perceiving this type of nudging from your higher self, from your soul, in order to reach your potential and fulfill what you came here to do, versus this kind of like ego program savior who tells you you've got to go and it's now and it's urgent and you have to save, and unless you do. So this is where the discernment comes in, and this is where there's a bit of difficulty for the younger star seeds, you know, who haven't yet had the experience. So I'm just trying to see if we can maybe share or chime in something, how we can help the younger ones who are kind of feeling that sense that they came here with a purpose, and yet, you know, having this balancing the ego structure and not falling into the trap of the ego, or even just being aware of it, because the mission nudge will come as a quiet voice. It won't come as fireworks. It won't come as urgency. It won't come as something that you must do today, now, this moment. It comes as something like what, again, Linda said, is the daily grind of kind of like getting up and getting on with the spirits of Christ, you know, having a bit of structure in your spiritual work, doing this, doing this, being yourself, just going with the flow. It comes as a very gentle type of thing. It won't necessarily come from a mental body construct. It will come as a feeling. So this type of discernment is worth cultivating, especially amongst the younger starseeds. When you're a bit older, you've already been through all this, so you are a bit calmer. You kind of, oh, I've seen it, I've done it, I've been there. But if I were a younger starseed, I would want to hear this advice. I mean, I wish somebody gave me this advice. Then maybe I wouldn't have listened. I don't know. That's I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. No, that's beautifully said. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. That's really good. Yeah, I mean, I think what's going to help the younger starseeds is you know, really focusing on, you know, I'm sure they already have, they're very aware of their virtues, they you know, God force, feeling and expression within their heart. You know, I think the younger generation are being born with a lot more online than what we had just even when we were born 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So I can think with the younger starseeds now, or they're not even called that now, are they? Crystal children, or, you know, it's just, yeah. So they have to be aware of the manipulation, as you mentioned, they really do, of, you know, setting up a trap of this urgency of, you know, I'm here for a mission and I know it in my heart, this mission, you know, when you start waking up to that and you get this sense of urgency, and it is like a nudge, but it's like, whoa, hang on a minute, just slow down. You've really got to have this foundation. You've got to come from this foundation, which is, you know, having that strength and fortitude. You know, that this is what we named it, is the core self. You're moving and coming from the core self, then whatever manipulation that they're trying to put on you to have this urgency, or you've got to rush into something, then they are setting up a trap. So, you know, what if you have that strong core sense of self, then you are more able to see these traps and to, you know, because they will take advantage of, you know, we are here in service, but you're in service to God, you know, so that is your core self. So always keep coming back to this core self, and, you know, they will throw in self-doubt. This is their game as well. It's all about doubt. And I think with the younger generation, if these doubts are being, you know, constantly, if, you know, you have to therefore release them as much as you can before you can move forwards, you know, because with this doubt, there is not a strong sense of self. Even though you are aware of, you know, your mission and who you are, and you're feeling God, you know, it's just to be aware of, you know, you cultivate these good virtues within yourself, and, you know, just really help to build this strength and this foundation. You know, there are so many tools there for you. I mean, your God self will always guide you every day. But this is it, you know, this is what we're just trying to convey, is this daily grind is always to scan, check, clear, scan, check, clear, you know, and have this foundation and this structure. And once you're coming within this safe hub, then you can deal with, you know, because day in, day out, we will get targeted. We will, you know, have these traps laid out for us, waiting. You know, there's a lot of it's happening to all of us. So, yeah.
Well said.
Yeah, I wanted to, could I add something to what you just said, Linda? Thank you for that. That was beautiful. Especially the part about what really caught my attention that you said is you have to have that foundation. I will be honest that I'm quite turned off by people when I come into the presence of someone who claims to be, let's say we're talking about the false archetypes again. And if someone is playing that Twilight Master or the false teacher, that kind of thing, I will have to say that I am quite turned off by that energy of, you know, and the reason I know it's false energy is because I've been able to be honest about my own shortcomings, and I've been expressing them, and I am, you know, I constantly work on myself and I'm not finished. And I know that there's a lot of ego dismantling that I've had to do within myself. And then if I come upon someone who hasn't done the work, hasn't done that shadow work, and is claiming to be a teacher and a leader, and yet is trapped in these, you know, these different ego constructs, where maybe it's, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what I've seen. There's various things, but it's that ego personality. It's that false pride. It's not coming from the pure heart. Work hasn't been done on the shadow self, and I can smell it a mile away. I sometimes don't say anything. I'm like, PU. Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the message that I'm trying to convey in a loving way. It's not to be mean, but I'm saying, okay, if you feel a calling to be a teacher and if you feel a calling to be a leader, okay, that's wonderful. Then go for it. But as Linda was saying, like we were all saying here, that core foundation has to be met first. We have to get into the core center of who we are. That's the ego dismantling. We get the pride out of the way. We get the jealousy out of the way. We, you know, all of that falsity out of the way. And we speak from the truth spirit. Let's harness in the truth spirit. To love, I can feel the love of the truth spirit. I love that so much. And so thank you for listening to that. And the last thing I wanted to say is when I was talking about that hierogamic union within, and when we can't force someone to do that, they have to do the work. But when a person does achieve that, they will achieve that, the merging of the two sons, the sacred feminine and sacred masculine. Okay, I mentioned that already. And that's the coming into oneness within the self and merging back into God consciousness, 0 point. But there's also people on the planet as well who can do this in couplehood. We have people who are able to connect in with, let's say if I'm a female in a female body, I have both masculine and feminine constructs within my light body that I have to heal and bring into union. But then I can meet a male partner if I wanted to, who is on the same line of thinking and the same path as me, who believes in that as well, and he has taken the reins of his own consciousness. He has said, I want to do this, I want to heal, I have all this ego dismantling, I have all of this false patterning that I want to dismantle. He's doing the work. He is aware of possession. He's aware of things that he needs to clear from his light body. He's aware of that. And he brings his sacred feminine and his sacred masculine into union through all of his hard work. This is the daily grind that Linda mentioned. He's doing his own piece. And then two people can then come together. This woman and this man can come together and have their, you know, a couplehood hierogamic union, which I know some people on the planet have been able to achieve. And I hear it's absolutely amazing beyond words. So just wanted to mention that as well as maybe something like to look forward to. But both people have to do the work. Both people have to do the work. This is the parasitizing. We have to make sure that, I mean, if you want to, if a person wants to, I'm just saying this is for my tip, that if someone's parasitizing us, that is not going to be hierogamic union. That is going to be the false light construct, the false light matrix that the negative alien agenda has perpetuated upon humanity. You can't have true hierogamic union if one person, let's say even me, let's say a woman is parasitizing the man. We can't have hierogamic union if the woman hasn't done her work and done her piece, or the man hasn't done his piece. You can't have couplehood, hierogamic union within the couplehood if both people are not on board with that and doing their pieces. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So both female and male have to transcend the lunar forces, because the lunar female energy is the false dark energy. The moon was falsely brought here as a satellite. So, and it affected the females, became the dark seductress and the dark energy, and a lot of female having this distortion. So the lunar element within male and female have to transcend or transform or alchemize into the solar, so that then they both integrate the solar aspects of solar feminine and solar masculine within themselves.
Yes.
So it's probably, we could talk about this maybe in another podcast, about this kind of lunar distortion of the lunar feminine, because it's a big topic, and it will be interesting to go into that into more detail, and it'll link to the sexual misery. Yeah. So I just wanted to maybe whet the appetite. Whet the appetite a bit.
Yeah, I'm getting excited at that. Oh yeah, I've got some stuff to share about that. I mean, you know, the lunar whole moon chain, all of that stuff is ties in with the new age and the false light. So you know, we're going to stick our neck out there. Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And the
I'm ready for that. That's my truth. This is the journey that I've been through. I was in the false light for a long time. So I had those experiences. So yeah, that's an idea then. Thanks, Trin. That's the next one.
Okay. All right. Have we finished? Are we ready to close? Yeah. All right. So so as always, I say thank you to my beautiful sisters, Linda and Sonia, and thank you to our listeners. Thank you. Thank you to all who are joining with us today and in the future. Please, as we always say, take what resonates, develop your discernment, discard the rest, whatever it is that doesn't resonate. We hope that you found our sharing useful and helpful, and that you will join with us again in the future podcasts, where we will continue sharing important and relevant topics and themes relating to ascension dynamics, light body healing and activation, sharing our personal journeys, whilst we all traversing this journey of returning to the source. So thank you, audience, and thank you, sisters.
Thank you, Trinity. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you. In gratitude. Beloved God and the eternal Christ families serving the law of one, please amplify our prayer request as the avatars of Christ Sophia and the true spirit that we are, for one and for all. We pray for the sovereign rights of all humanity to be restored to God's natural laws on this earth. May all those that are awakening, feeling betrayed, feeling confused by this anti-human war that is playing out, we lovingly decree that their hearts are healed, their spirits reclaimed in the Holy Trinity, our beloved Mother and Father, and Christ Sophia that has returned to this earth. May we stand strong with love and courage, bringing coherence to every level of our consciousness, remembering the truth of the infinite God spark that we are. We pray on behalf of all children of all of humanity. We pray that human trafficking and satanic ritual abuse continues to be revealed so that it can end completely, totally, and fully. We lovingly decree and we ask for the freedom of humanity, of the enslavement and of the entrapment from the psychopathic death cults. May disclosure be revealed soon, as God would have it be. May the truth set us free. In unity we will prevail. Thank you, beloveds. Thank you, guardians. Thank you, God. Thank you. And thank you all for being with us today in gratitude. And thank you, sisters.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Trinity. Okay. Much
Thank
love.
you. Much love.
Love to all.